In falling asleep, I expected to be greeted with another one of my mysterious nightmares. To my surprise, I had none. I woke up feeling refreshed, no recollection of any dreams whatsoever. It's what relief. A relief, that is, until I became aware of the nightmare that I had woken into. I could hear chanting in a room nearby, in a language unknown to me. I found this very odd, but it compelled me to come to it, so I got out of bed and started making my way to the sound. I slowly walked through a dirt hallway when it became apparent to me that I was no longer in control of my own movements. This is when I started to panic. What was happening? Why was I still walking? I tried to stop and walk back, but it was no use. I just kept moving towards the sound of chanting, as if this wasn't enough. The flashes were starting to come back. I could hear the same loud noises and see the same twisted imagery from the mild, psychotic breaks from reality that I had experienced before. I could feel my mind deteriorating as I uncontrollably walked to my undetermined destination. The images were hard to make out, but I could see the red wolf again, as well as the red-cloaked people. The red wolf was barking, though I couldn't hear it over the unbearably loud ringing in my ears. In between images of a howling red wolf was the same image of the red cloaks huddled in formation around something. It took me a moment to realize, but this was no longer imagery. It was reality. At the end of the dirt hall was another dirt room, with red-cloaked people gathering around a circle, incessantly chanting for some unknown reason. The imagery and sounds in my mind went away, and the chanting ceased. Even so, my movements were still being mapped out by an unseen force. I kept walking. After one last moment of inner turmoil, trying to resist my own body's motions, I had finally arrived in front of what must have been at least 10 red-cloaked figures. They stood up and spread apart, revealing what they had been surrounding. In the center of their now broken circle was the woman I had met before. She was kneeling before a rather large tin chalice on the floor. She then looked up at me and spoke. "It is time." Time for what? I realized now that I was at least in control of my mouth movements. This wasn't exactly relief, but it was a start. Time to fulfill a long-forgotten divination. I didn't really know what to say at this point, so I let her elaborate. "You know why you found serenity in the statue that once stood above us?" I continued to look puzzled, in the hopes that she would give me some answers. "It is because we have been calling you. With the help of many incarnations and years of patience, we have drawn you here, to us. They lured me here to them." She can't be serious. Either that, or I really am dreaming. How else could any of this be possible? If they truly did call out to me, then for what purpose did they do so? I left my questions unspoken. Perhaps I should explain further. We are what is left of the clan of the Red Wolf. We follow the teachings of the Red Wolf. He is our deity, our spirit, our protector. Many of us were killed in olden times, accused of practicing witchcraft and sorcery. We are the last surviving members. Our purpose is simple. We are to seek divinity in nature and protect Earth's wildlife as best we can. That is where you come in. Me. My curiosity was getting the best of me. Yes. You are the one spoken of in our ancient teachings, the one whom is to rid the land of its endangerment. You are the savior of our time, passed down for generations with the proper spells to summon you, but until now, no one has heeded the call. We were beginning to think that the stories of you were just old wise tales and nothing more. But here you are. There is finally hope." I looked at her in disbelief, trying to process what I had just been told. It was beginning to make sense, but not fully. The red wolf I dreamt of, the red-cloaked figures, the statue. Was this really the answer? Come on now, we must finish preparing. Before I knew it, my limbs were moving on their own again. I walked over to the woman and knelt before the chalice. She pulled out a strange red dagger from her cloak and grabbed one of my arms. I became frightened, but I still couldn't control my own actions. She then pierced my skin with the dagger, leaving quite a large cut as she did. For some reason, I felt no pain. My blood poured into the chalice at an unsettling rate, and as I watched it ooze out of me, I felt myself growing dizzy after a couple of seconds. And then I passed out. In my blood loss-induced slumber, I dreamt once again. I was back in the park, just like before. Only now it was nighttime, and there was not a soul in sight, red-cloaked or otherwise. I looked up and saw a beautiful night sky. There were more stars than usual, all brilliantly illuminated in the park. I turned around to look at the statue. Just as I expected, it was there. I turned back around. There, not only a few yards in front of me, was the red wolf, sitting as calm as ever. I was taken aback, but not scared in the slightest. His presence was reassuring for some reason. I decided to walk towards him, however slowly. He remained still as I did. I took a final step and found myself directly in front of the wolf, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And surely enough, something did happen. Something inexplicable. The red wolf began to mutate, for lack of a better word. He grew taller, discolored. I wasn't exactly sure what I was witnessing. My best guess is that the red wolf was beginning to take on another form. A few moments later, my suspicions were confirmed to be correct. Now standing directly in front of me was not a wolf. Not an animal at all, it was a man. A tall, very old-looking man. He was bald, with luxurious and long facial hair, not to mention red eyes. He was also wearing a very remarkable and interesting red robe. He looked down at me with an understanding glare and grinned. I was speechless. "So you are the one I spoke of in my teachings." I couldn't come up with a response. Even though this was a dream, I was still amazed by what I had just seen. "If you truly are who the clan believes you are, then there are some things that you need to know. Come with me." I followed his lead. Before I could even wonder about where he was taking me, the dream world around us changed. We seamlessly stepped out of the park and into a forest, a red forest, one like I had never seen before. The bark on the trees was red, the leaves were red, and even the animals had a reddish hue in their fur and feathers. The dream made sunlight vibrantly flood my field of vision, creating a remarkable luster. It was breathtaking, and I was awestruck. This is the world I once knew. This is the world I sought to protect, and the reason the clan of the Red Wolf was born. I kept my gaze on the world surrounding me. I watched as the leaves wavered in the sunlight. As the slight breeze went by, I saw flora and fauna in every direction, boundless as can be. It was a sight to behold, but it saddened me that it only existed in my own mind. I thought I now better understood the clan's purpose, but I still did not understand why any of this was happening to me. I still protect what little nature is left in this world to the best of my abilities, but it has grown more and more difficult. The largest obstacle I face now is the clan itself. Clan? Why are they an obstacle? Aren't they helping? I asked in confusion. No, they are not. You have to understand this, especially if you are the one I spoke of long, long ago. The clan of the Red Wolf has twisted the words of my scriptures and betrayed the very foundation of my teachings. They wish to cleanse the earth and begin anew. They mistakenly believe that this is the only way to protect nature as a whole. So they want to kill all of mankind. Yes. But in the wake of their disastrous actions, everything else will die as well. They know this, but it is all part of their plan, rebuilding the world from the ground up, creating nature from the ashes of destruction. That doesn't make any sense. Why do they think that will work? I was still confused, but my body was now becoming consumed with fear and a bit of rage at the same time. Their doctrine is heavily flawed. The clan has grown weary over the years, trying to hold on to my ideals. In failing to follow them properly, they have disregarded them completely. interpreting them to be some sort of blueprint for a wide-reaching cleansing of the earth. However, they cannot do it without you. Me? Why me? Still craved answers. I did, in fact, speak of a divine hero who would one day come along and save this world from endangerment. If that truly is you, then the blood they have stolen from you will give them the power they need to finish what they've started. None of this was making any sense. The world was now void of any sound form of logic. Even so, I still felt an insatiable need to see how the story unraveling before me played out. It was the same craving I had been feeling ever since I ventured out down that spiral staircase in the mysterious abyss. Okay, what do I need to do? I asked, trying to seem confident in my own abilities. You will know when the time comes. When the time comes? When will that be? What if I fail? I need answers from you. I don't know if I can do this alone. So much for seeming confident. Also, if you're the Red Wolf and I'm this divine hero that you spoke of so long ago, then shouldn't you know if I'm him? I asked after a moment of deliberation, feeling that I deserved to know the truth. It may surprise you to hear this, but I am not an all-powerful, all-knowing, supernatural being. I am merely a teacher. He said this with an honest grin on his face. At least he disclosed one truth to me, even if this particular truth left me feeling anxious and unnerved. What if I'm not him? My question would go unanswered. He just seemed to stand there with the same expression on his face. At this moment, I realized that the scenery around us had frozen as well. Leaves that had fallen from the trees were now petrified in midair. I walked around a bit, noticing that the whole forest was like this. If this weren't a dream, I'd have been petrified myself, only with fear. I walked back to where I once stood, and soon enough the old man, or Red Wolf, should I say, was still there. He still had that grin on his face, making me feel even more unsettled. As I examined him more closely, I became aware of something. His eyes were looking downward. I could have sworn they were pointing straight ahead before. Then again, who am I to question my own dream logic? I followed his blank stare downward, and then noticed something else. His hand was sticking out of his robe, and he was holding something. I took it from his lifeless grasp and held it in my hand. I looked it over and realized this was a small scroll of sorts. Before I had the chance to unravel it and read its contents, the Red Wolf materialized before my eyes. At the same moment, nightfall washed over the entire forest in an instant. I could hear and feel a cold but soft wind blowing from my left. I could barely see, but I could make out the leaves finishing their descent to the ground below. I now knew that the landscape around me was unfrozen. This in no way comforted me, as the oddly starless and moonless sky made it very hard to see even a few yards in front of me. To make matters worse, I could hear movement behind me. I turned around slowly to identify just what was making the leaves crunch on the forest floor. I squinted and rubbed my eyes but saw nothing. It was probably too dark. I thought I should just ignore the sound, seeing as it was only a dream, but before turning back around, I heard it once again. This time I could see two glowing eyes coming out from behind one of the trees. It startled me, but I remained calm. After all, it was probably just the Red Wolf. Is that you? I asked in a hushed tone, so as not to instigate the animal, in case it was the Red Wolf. The animal let out a maddening growl, sending chills down my spine. I tried to focus my eyes and look at the animal more clearly. Upon doing so, I could see that it was indeed a wolf. Looking even more intently at the animal, I could see that its fur was not red. Instead, it was black as the night air around us. I was now at a loss for any inner dialogue. Instinct took over. I turned back around slowly, firmly clenching the scroll in my hand. I took one step forward and heard the wolf move in my direction. I started to run as fast as my dream body would allow, weaving in and out between the still hard-to-see trees. As fast as I was running, I could hear the wolf gaining on me, never falling far behind. I guess this was it. It was now or never. I had to read the scroll. I took the scroll in hand and I unraveled it before my eyes. I kept glancing at the trees ahead of me so I would make out where I was going, and this, as well as the lack of any light, made it difficult to read. I could see words, but I couldn't make them out. See, at this point, my heart was beating faster than my feet were hitting the ground. I focused my eyes with all of my might and attempted to read the words before me. I could only make out the first line. In rain and wind, the kingdom will fall. After reading this line, I looked up to see a tree directly in front of me. I was moving too fast to avoid it. Within seconds, I collided with the bark head first. I fell to the ground and looked up at the now blurry night sky. I could see 2 stars that weren't there before. I blinked a couple of times, letting my eyes adjust, and looked again. Those were no stars. Those were the eyes of the wolf. It was now looking down at my battered body, teeth seething with saliva. It let out a growl and then closed in. I was a goner. They say if you die in a dream, you wake up. I would have to say with a fair degree of certainty that I died. And as luck would have it, that saying holds true. I was actually happy to wake up lying in that makeshift bed in that underground dungeon-like room. Even though it was a dream, I was now scared for my life. More than I'd ever been while I was awake. In a relieved stupor, I jumped out of bed, happy to be alive. I moved my limbs around, ecstatic that none of them were broken. The dream had me so rattled that I even searched for teeth marks to make sure that the wolf hadn't started eating me alive. And that's when my relief vanished. Upon looking at my arms for imaginary teeth marks, I noticed a scar on one of them. I remembered the red-cloaked woman doing this to me earlier. I had half hoped that her blood-drawing ritual was a dream as well, but deep down I knew it couldn't have been. Seeing the scar made me fully aware of the gravity of the situation at hand. I remembered everything the Red Wolf had told me, and though reluctant, I was willing to act. I walked out of the dirt room and into the next. I expected to see the clan continuing their ritual with the blood I had unwillingly donated. This was not the case. Sprawled across the dirt floor were the bodies of the Red Wolf clan members, seemingly lifeless. What else was going on here? Upon further inspection, I noticed their arms were slashed, just as my arm was. It would appear that they too gave some blood for their cause. They, however, were not as lucky as me. Not a single one of them was alive. None of them, that is, except for the woman. She was absent from this self-inflicted massacre. I could see fresh droplets of blood painted onto the dirt floor, leading out of the room and into the hall. Without a moment's hesitation, I decided to follow them. Whatever was happening had to be put to a halt. Without taking a single step, I heard the most violent eruption of thunder from the outside world above. The storm was certainly getting worse. The sound of thunder also scared a bit of sense into me. I was so ready to follow the blood trail that I didn't even realize that I hadn't a single clue as to what I was embarking on. I still didn't fully know what was happening or how I was to stop it. Was I going to confront the red-cloaked woman and ask her to stop? I think not. I stood still for a moment as I collected my thoughts. I could hear another brutal clap of thunder as I stood still in the now death-ridden room. This brought my attention to the storm and triggered a memory. In rain and wind, the kingdom will fall. Oh, that's it. Why didn't I recognize it before? The clan was creating a storm of devastating proportions, one that would rid the world of any signs of life. The revelation gave me confidence, and with it I followed the trail of blood. I still didn't know what to do, but I now felt that this was the right course of action. I followed the blood all the way down the hall until I came upon a brass door. It was a door with what was presumably the symbol of the clan painted on it. It was a door that I was all too familiar with. I knew that this door had to be the same one that I had come upon in the tunnel. If so, then I knew what would be waiting for me on the other side. By now, the red-cloaked woman was probably already halfway to the surface, and if I was to follow her, I'd have to once again crawl through those long, dark tunnels. I took a deep breath and I opened that door. My suspicions were correct. The room I had passed out in earlier was no longer lit up with its torches. The flame had died. The only reason I could see the room at all was from the light shining from the hallway. I looked up at the jars of fireflies dangling from the ceiling and grabbed one. I then pressed on, knowing the trek would be easier this time around. With natural light in hand, I headed for the dirt crawl space in front of me. I made it through the first tunnel in less than half the time that I had originally taken me. I felt as confident as ever as I stepped up to the door of the next tunnel, knowing this one would be even less difficult to traverse. I opened the door and walked in. I noticed that the flames on the torches here had died as well, but this was no problem now that I had my own light. Given that this tunnel was not as narrow as the last, I began speed walking. This eventually turned into a sprint. As I ran through the tunnel, I became careless. At what I would have guessed would have been the hallway point, I dropped the jar of fireflies. It shattered as it hit the dirt floor, and the fireflies flew off in different directions, leaving me blind. With a sunken heart, I stood completely still, wallowing in self-pity. When the fireflies were completely out of sight, I heard a familiar sound. No, this time it wasn't thunder. It was a growl. I slowly turned around to face the horrible sound. Then in the distance I could see the wolf's eyes gazing at me intently. I didn't know what to do. How could this be? This was a dream! Wasn't it? And once again, instinct took over. I turned back around and started running once again through the darkness. I could hear the wolf catching up to me. I just prayed that I wouldn't trip and fall and become dinner. And in a running sweat, I noticed that something off in the distance, that next door was open. It was open, and I could see light. Not only light, but I could see the brass staircase leading to the surface. There was something else, too, sitting right in front of the staircase. It was the red wolf. A strange light seemed to be emanating from him. I ran faster, keeping the red wolf in my sight. My heart was pounding. I could hear the growling from behind me getting closer, and after what felt like a lifetime of running, I was running so fast that I almost ran straight into the spiral staircase. I adjusted myself and turned around. The black wolf came running right into the room and lunged at me. I shielded myself, hoping the red wolf would protect me. And before the beast could reach me, it materialized. Just as it came into the light, I was so relieved that I didn't even question it. I looked over at the red wolf. He simply looked upward and barked, and I knew what I had to do. I raced up the staircase and pushed the cap off the statue's base, exposing the storm-ridden world above. I walked out into the park and noticed that it was untouched by the storm. It was almost as if it was blanketed in some sort of force field. I looked out to the center of the park and saw the red-cloaked woman. Her eyes were glowing as she peered upwards. Holding the chalice tightly with her arms outstretched, she seemed to be in control of the whole thing. I ran over to her and her eyes came down to meet mine. They now bared a striking resemblance to the eyes of the black wolf. Yes, you made it. Now you can witness the cleansing of the world, revel in it, be a part of it. No, what you're doing is wrong. You're supposed to protect the world, not destroy everything in it. I've spoken with the red wolf. I watched as this certainty was absorbed. He spoke to you? Before she could utter another word, the red wolf walked up beside me, growling at the woman. Red wolf? But how? He barked at her in disgust. Now do you understand? He told me that you've misinterpreted his teachings. You need to stop this at once. I spoke with authority and stood my ground. No, this isn't right. This can't be so. He isn't the Red Wolf. He must be an imposter. The Red Wolf lunged at her in an attempt to thwart her unintentionally evil plans. As he did, I watched as she pulled the red dagger from her cloak, the same one she used to slash my arm. No, I yelled in dismay. But it was too late. The Red Wolf leapt at the woman. She took the dagger and thrust it deep into his torso. I heard a small cry from the wolf as he fell to the ground and stopped breathing. I couldn't believe it. He was dead. The Red Wolf was dead. You killed him. How could you? You've killed the Red Wolf, your very own spirit and protector. I found myself more emotionally involved in the Red Wolf's death than I expected. The woman, however, did not react. She was far too busy controlling the forces of Mother Nature to even care about what she had done. I was stricken with grief. I ran over to the red wolf's side. I knelt down before his body, wondering why it had come to something like this. I looked at the red dagger sticking out of his gut. Just then, an idea hatched in my brain, and without a second thought, I grabbed the knife, I stood up to face the red-cloaked woman, and I plunged it deep into where I guessed her heart should be. This was finally enough to make her react. She looked down at me as the life escaped her wretched body. She attempted to speak, but only inaudible sounds came out. She finally mustered up enough strength to say, "Why?" It is clear to me that she truly believed that what she was doing was right. She took her final breath and the chalice of blood fell to the ground, spilling its contents as it did. At this very moment, the storm ceased, all at once. The clouds dispersed, leaving a brilliant light to shine down on the park and the rest of the world. I looked down at the red wolf, but he was gone. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I heard a familiar voice. "Maybe you are the divine hero I spoke of, after all." Before I could turn around to greet the voice, I became dizzy and fell to the ground. I passed out once again. When I came to, I felt a familiar bed beneath me. It wasn't the makeshift bed of the dirt room. No, this was my bed. I was home. How? Why? I jumped out of bed and I looked out my window. It was a sunny day, to my delight. And was it all a dream? Did it really happen? The first option made the most sense, but I had to be sure. I looked down at my arm. There was no scar. That was surprising, but it wasn't enough to convince me. I quickly threw on some clothes and I left the house, walking toward the park, and when I came into view, I was stunned. The statue, it was there. But how? It was becoming quickly apparent that everything I had been through was nothing more than a long, drawn-out, and vivid nightmare. I remained overwhelmed, looking up at the statue, but I decided to believe in what logic was telling me. It must have been a dream. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. I walked down to the local coffee shop. I ordered my usual breakfast, accompanied by a large cup of coffee. I thanked the barista and I headed out, fulfilling my usual daily routines as I came to the park. I stopped walking, and I looked up at the statue, and after a good long stare, I looked away, and I kept walking. Before I could go too far, I noticed something in the woods behind the church. It was far away, but I swear I could make out a familiar outline of an animal. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but it was gone. I simply smiled and continued walking. I was at peace. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta. Just wanted to say thanks so much for listening. You guys are what makes this channel worthwhile. There'll be new horror stories every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night, as well as gaming live streams every Friday and Sunday night. Please help support on patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, and you can hear me as well as many other creepypasta narrators live 24/7 at SCRM Radio.com. Sweet dreams.